a mad scientist with the goggles, and he's stirring like a kettle of things together. Welcome to another episode of the Unmanned Podcast, powered by USI. Today we sit down with Rachel Miller, UVM Remote Pilot Supervisor, and Deb Sheeler, the Production Manager for UAS Activities from Davey Resource Group. In this episode, we're going to learn about how drones are used in vegetation and right-of-way management. We'll also briefly discuss those crazy dudes that fly with ginormous razor blades under helicopters. I don't know how they do it. And we'll get to see some actual drones being used for land management in our video segments. Thanks for joining us. Let's go. Well, for our listeners, we're here with Rachel and Deb, and we're going to talk to them about Davey Resource Group, and we're super excited about that. We'll talk about how drones are used in some unique use cases, and I'm really interested in learning about that and how safety is enhanced. Can you give us a quick, kind of a high-level snapshot of how you two got into your roles and got into the drone industry to begin with? I think that's always an interesting story when we talk about how, kind of like the Marvel origin story, how we became into the drones. Let's start with you, Rachel.
Sure. So I've been in the aviation and drone space for a little over 10 years. I actually started on the manned aircraft side. I was just finishing up my PPL at a local flight school when the 107 came out, and started using drones for photography, especially real estate. Just found it to be an awesome passion of mine, and looked for other opportunities to use those skills, and was hired on to a local roofing company that was using drones for visual and infrared for building envelope and roofing inspections. And they found such a great value add for that service. They decided to start their own service line and wanted to grow that team. So I came on with them as a pilot, and then transitioned into more of an operational management role, as well as a chief technology officer. Was with them for a couple years, and then got the opportunity to come on with Davey to help spearhead and manage their pilot group and team. And that's how I got to work with Deb. So,
Deb, how about you? How did you get into the drone space, and what's your background?
So my background is more in the geospatial industry, more on the GIS and remote sensing. And I had been completing my master's program here at Kent State University, right in nearby Kent. And when I was finishing up, sat in a class with and TA'd someone at Davey, and had the opportunity to come on board as a GIS technician in 97. So from there, where I kind of expanded was building out the geospatial and GIS side more onto the remote sensing. And over the years, I've had the opportunity to kind of supervise and manage an amazing team of GIS and remote sensing specialists. And from there, that's kind of where it naturally expanded into the opportunity to be able to bring on additional services and solutions involving UAS services.
So it's interesting that you two both have been in the drone industry for quite some time. So you have seen the changes within the industry and the use cases and how drones are deployed. And I think that's a unique perspective. A lot of folks that we've talked to have, the 5 years of experience or so. And to see somebody that has beyond that is super cool to think about where you begin and where we are today. And we'll talk about some of those use cases today, and I'm excited about that. For those not familiar with Davey Resource Group, and admittedly, I wasn't until a few months ago, and then I realized, wow, there's so much going on with Davey, and I think they will be interested in hearing about that. So why don't we kind of talk about the core focus of Davey, and then kind of what the drone integration is there.
Davey Resource Group is an environmental and natural resource consulting firm, a fully owned subsidiary of the Davey Tree Expert Company. We happen to have hit our 45 years of employee ownership last year, 2024. We're based nationwide, offices across the country, providing local expertise and turnkey solutions around the environmental consulting and restoration, or urban forestry, civil engineering, utility solutions, specifically on asset and vegetation management, reliability, and integration within the UVM space. Our focus here at Davie Resource Group is more on the technology and expertise, leveraging cutting edge technology with a team of professionals across the board, right? We have reaches to all of our biologists, ecologists, scientists, GIS remote sensing specialists. And our key focus mainly is for client-centric, employee-focused approach. So around customized solutions, cost-effective and reliable solutions tailored to clients' needs.
I know that vegetation management is one of the key things that is going on in Davie, and I'm kind of interested in, I think, could you educate our listeners on what exactly that is? Like how do we implement vegetation management even before drones? And then maybe we'll talk about how drones enhance the capabilities there at Davie to do that.
With vegetation management, our team specifically focuses on the utility side of it. So we work with clients that have transmission, distribution assets, solar farms, pipeline right-of-ways. And they have certain, federal laws that they have to maintain those right-of-ways and certain clearances from those assets, which can, cause safety risks like wildfires and hazards for operating that equipment and assets. So with drones, we've been able to integrate quite a lot of different use cases. We use the drones it's mostly vegetation management and asset inspections. So we use a variety of different sensors, visual, thermal, multispectral, LiDAR, and then we also use the drones for spraying and seeding as well. So we can be involved with a client from the very beginning, pre-construction, to where we might go out and fly with a LiDAR sensor to identify volumetrics of tree removals, how much timber they're going to need to remove to start those construction projects, inspect the assets after they've been built, as well as following up with either ground cover seeding or vegetation treatments like spraying and seeding to maintain the right-of-way as well.
That's super interesting. So, I mean, I'm not familiar with what did we do before we had a drone giving us that what I'm assuming much more detailed visual perspective.
In the past, we've had boots on the ground, and that sometimes takes a lot longer than normal. Identify the locations as well as the assets on site. The other opportunity we also utilized was resources like satellite imagery, manned aircraft, images there, where, that's great, but when you're looking more localized and it makes more sense with, all the different tools in your toolbox, identifying where it makes the most sense to use the right technology for the right time and place, that's where we identified, well, why can't we utilize our UAS opportunities in order to be able to capture more current imagery, higher resolution, as well as more specialized specifics, and being able to capture and identify features more efficiently.
I imagine you're able to be more accurate too. So you're not having to clear maybe as big a space as you would previous to having the detail that drone technology provides you, and maybe you would go in and forgive me for being not too familiar, but you'd clear an acre when you only needed to clear a quarter acre, and now with this detail, you're able to kind of maintain some of the vegetation as opposed to take out more than you need to. I don't know. Is that something you're seeing as a return on that investment or a result?
Yeah, absolutely. Because, being able to fly lower and slower versus traditional manned aircraft, we can get a much higher resolution and higher accuracy with that detailed high resolution imagery. And that enables us to, whether it's spraying or seeding or tree removals, to be more precise in those applications. We're not using as much chemicals to apply as well. And then there's less drift than there would be from manned aircraft, because we're able to fly lower and more precise and do more prescriptive spraying based on the data that we pull from our sensors.
No, that's great. And I was going to ask about that a little later about some of those safety improvements that you're speaking about. But I know when we start with something new and novel, that it doesn't always go smooth. And I've talked to a couple other folks on the Unmanned podcast about how their challenges or some of the roadblocks that they faced when they started building up these new and novel use cases. And it's always interesting to learn about those. And I think our audience can learn about those challenges when they're starting their programs. So what were some surprises that you might have had in early pilots or partnerships at Davy, and how did you address those?
One would be obviously, FAA legislation. It was a little difficult in the beginning to get a Part 137 agricultural operating certificate, and there was a lot of steps involved and hoops you had to jump through to initially get that. With a lot of spray operations, the bigger the drone, the higher the tank capacity, the more you can spray in a day. Over 55-pound operations categories where we have to get the additional exemptions, the 44807, to be able to even operate those drones, and having to make sure we have those operations manuals, training manuals, and policies in place to support that. But just the time it took to kind of get through that process initially was a little bit of a challenge. We're hoping it would be a lot quicker, but we were able to get through that. But also in regards to Davy being a nationwide company, there's state licensing requirements as well. So every project that we have that's in a different state, we either have to get someone licensed if we don't have them licensed already, with the licenses and categories they need to have for operating on a utility right-of-way, as well as some states also require them to have their aerial category as well added onto that core pesticide license. And every state's different in regards to what the requirements are. So just pilots across the country and making sure that we meet all the licensing and federal requirements was a challenge to kind of just manage how we were going to grow those services, right? Where those opportunities are and what services we're going to focus on regionally versus nationally. And the more regional we're able to stay, obviously helps with quoting out those projects and mobilization costs and things like that. So
can you get, because this is super interesting to me, and I'm assuming our audience wants to know too, that state to state, it has a difference in how you apply pesticides or how you transport them. Can you explain one of those differences and kind of one of those challenges in detail? Like what is something you encountered?
Yeah, it varies so much between state to state. Like for Ohio, for instance, drone pilots can spray underneath an Ohio licensed applicator, and that applicator supervise those operations and approve the plan before they go out to spray and the areas and chemical mix and everything. But they can be within 2 hours of the site where they don't need to be the actual pilot doing the application, as long as they've approved and supervised that particular area that's being treated. States like North Carolina, for instance, requires that the pilot themselves has the aerial applicator category added onto their initial core pesticide license. And there's other categories as well, like right-of-way or aquatic, depending on where you're spraying. But they have to work under someone called a master journeyman for, I believe it's 125 hours, right, Deb? Correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's 125, but until they can actually do those types of spraying applications on their own. So there's a lot more apprenticeship hours that are needed.
This is super interesting to me because coming from the delivery world where we try to make drone delivery fit in the Part 135 category, and there was just a laundry list of things that just don't apply at all. For instance, security of the cockpit. There is no cockpit, but in the 135 rule, there's requirements for all these things. So we had to go and have declaration of compliance and other types of activities. So this is super interesting to hear that state by state is even more diverse and having to have these requirements. And that can certainly be a challenge. Do you see, and I don't want to go too far into the 108 conversation because we've had a few of those conversations already, but do you see improvements with the 108, or is that kind of not touching the pesticide application use case?
I'm hoping the way, it's written now that it will help, streamline some of those operations and approval processes. Drone spraying is kind of one of the newer applications, and it's still got a lot of way to go with the technology and just with capabilities for swarming beyond line of sight and things like that. But looking forward to hopefully it helps improve our operations. So,
what platforms are you using for your aerial application?
So for aerial application, we first started out with DJI platforms. They were the most advanced and reliable on the market at the time, obviously.
Like the Matrice, I'm assuming.
Oh yeah, definitely. So we
Okay.
started out, with a Matrice 210, and it's evolved. We have everything from DJI to Skydio to Helio to Leading Edge.
Oh, wow.
A lot of different free fly, a lot of different platforms. We had to kind of diversify too, because, for our client needs and with, DJI bans looming, over the horizon and a lot of uncertainty about that and cybersecurity concerns, we branched more into US made drones.
Gotcha. Yeah, USI, we're pretty neutral on platforms. We just want to make sure that folks are deploying those platforms in the safest manner possible and proficient at the deployment and the use of drone technology. The reason why I asked is to bring up to our audience that you have a diverse collection of different drones for different use cases, just like an airline has a 737 and a 747. It's different airplanes for different use cases. And we're seeing that quite often at other corporations that have multiple platforms to do different things. So that's interesting there. And just so I can get one last kind of mental picture on what does that typical herbicide or spraying mission look like, from kind of getting to the site and deploying the materials.
Sure, yeah, and definitely there's a lot more prep and post flight work that has to be done with aerial applications. Obviously we'll have everything with us. Water, chemicals. We have to have a lot more additional equipment like mixing tanks and holding tanks and things like that to be able to do that mixing on site. But generally we would have a 2 to 3 person crew, depending on if it's an over 55-pound drone or not. So we have a pilot, a VO, and maybe an additional chemical handler mixer to help on site keep those operations efficient. Once we get out on site, we have everything with us, generator for charging batteries, chemicals, water. The pilot is in charge of being the PIC, setting up the drone and all the equipment. And then the VO chemical handler mixer would start getting the mix ready and would be the one basically in charge of being the visual observer on site, as well as loading the drone and keeping batteries continuously charging as well, so we can maintain our spray operations or seeding operations.
No, that's interesting, and I have a picture in my head, and I'm sure it's wildly off, but like a mad scientist with the goggles, and he's stirring like a kettle of things together. But I'm sure it's very professional, and what I'm wondering, Deb, is maybe you can speak to what's the safety enhancements around that, because prior to having this drone technology and loading the drone with the liquids, it was a human would have to do it with a tank truck or whatnot, I'm assuming. So what are the safety enhancements that you're seeing for our utility and other use cases?
Safety enhancements for sure. With Davey, we have a focus on safety culture, first and foremost. So making sure that we have all our PPE gear, specifically anything related to chemical mixing, make sure that the team is fully equipped with kits as well, fills kits and eye wash, anything that may happen, we want to be prepared for when it comes to safety as a whole.
The standard kind of thing that we think about in the drone space is also like, how is this taking a human out of a dangerous situation? But it sounds like we have 3 humans there doing this operation. Is there still an enhancement to safety from the perspective of what we used to do?
In general, the employees have way less exposure to the chemicals. We still have to mix the chemicals, obviously, and load it into the drone, but in general, there's way less exposure. And then for the clients or property owners, there's less drift that's coming from the drone versus a manned aircraft. And we're using less chemicals because these are more precise applications. And a lot of times,
and for those folks that might be watching unfamiliar with drift, can you briefly just explain that?
Yeah. So, generally when we get drift, it's when the chemical veers off course from where it's supposed to be applied. And usually that's because of wind. So another thing we have to factor into our operations where you don't have to consider at lower wind speeds as much with standard sensor drones is that we can't spray over 10 miles per hour because that greatly increases the drift onto like adjacent properties. So we have to be careful with that and have to carry drift insurance on our policy as well.
Drift insurance. Yeah, and there's insurance for everything.
But in regards to like efficiencies though, I mean, we've done some studies with our ground crew versus traditional methods versus aerial. And a lot of times the drone is at least 4 times more efficient than boots on the ground. But where it really comes into play is difficult to access areas that may be dangerous on foot or with other vehicles where the drone can get to. Maybe it's an island where the right of way goes through and normally someone has to get to it by boat just to backpack spray. The drone can be more safe and efficient in that way.
Yeah, I mean, you're spraying from the drone itself. And so certainly if you're doing a backpack spray, that drift can come right to the employee themselves, right? Versus the drone being out and away from the pilot. And if there is drift, it's not anywhere near personnel.
Oh yeah, that's a great thing to point out because you don't consider that you're really like right there on top of the application when you're doing it something like a backpack or even in a vehicle. You're feet away maybe, but then from the drone you can be a good distance away and make sure you're safe and have a good standoff. So that's something interesting I hadn't thought about. Well, can we talk briefly about what projects Davey is doing today? I think that might be interesting to our folks and hearing we've talked about theory a little bit and why this is better, but what are you guys doing today? What's going on with Davey and projects that we might be familiar with or can hear about?
Sure. Yeah. So on the remote sensing LiDAR side of it, we've worked with quite a lot of different utilities across the country with their wildfire management programs to identify vegetation encroachments on the lines. We've also done quite a lot of spraying on utility right-of-ways where we're using a selective herbicide treatment, which means basically it's going to kill a certain type of vegetation. So most of the time they want to kill the woody species that could grow up into the lines and cause fire hazards. So
we don't say kill. We'll say control.
Control. Sorry. To control the woody vegetation species that could grow up into the lines to cause fire hazards, and then leave the grass underneath. So then they could just more easily maintain that right of way. We've also tested out some R&D with chemical side trimming as well, where traditionally a helicopter might come with a hanging saw that kind of cuts along the right of way, just to test out more targeted methods. And then we've been working quite a lot with multispectral in regards to invasive species mapping and prescriptive spraying as well. So with different parks across the country from Ohio to California, where they're trying to manage those invasive species, where we can map that out, locate where those invasive species are, and then help them make a treatment plan.
That's super cool. And I thought so as a helicopter pilot myself, I thought those folks flying those saws are insane. I'm like, it just blows me away. And they're so close to power lines too with the saws, because you're cutting down vegetation that might hit those power lines. It's amazing. Those folks, they are very either brave or foolish. I don't know which one for sure. So let's look into the future a little bit. I mean, what are we seeing as we look maybe 3 or 5 years into the future, what are we seeing the utility companies needing, or how do you believe drone activity will reshape the way the utilities are operating? Have we kind of hit the pinnacle, or is there just so much more and we're just scratching the surface here?
There's definitely so much more out there for sure. I mean, the industry experience and knowledge, like around safety mindset, is key, right? In order to be able to, continue to expand those services. But with the technology always changing, staying proficient and consistently maintaining a high level of skill and competence as a pilot requires continuous learning and practice. So it's about fully being capable and ready to handle any type of situation with confidence and expertise. And that's where the safety focus is comes into play, along with, our partnership here with USI. Um, Davie Seed Campus is a perfect example of kind of focusing on that, where our science employee and education and development campus has provided Davie and shown how we've invested in our employees and provided continuous growth and around specialized trainings specifically, and training specialized similar to what we're going towards, which is the industry on UAS industry.
A lot of folks think like drones and robots will put others out of business or something like this, and I think it's more of it's just like the automobile. Before, the automobile was horses, and now the automobile's here, and we still use the automobile to help us move equipment and things like that the horse would do before. And so the drone or drone technology is just one more tool that we're going to use to enhance our ability to do things. And so some people have a negative kind of view of that, but it sounds like you at Davie are looking at it positively and maybe having to upskill or retrain some employees to utilize these tools in the future, as opposed to it's not replacing them. It's just going to be one more thing that we use to enhance their capabilities in whatever industry they're in. Rachel, what do you have for us maybe in 3 to 5 years that you see on your crystal ball?
Like you mentioned, Matt, I mean, with Davie, the drone is a tool, so you still need qualified, personnel and people with that expertise, that even though, you could have your Part 107 and know how to fly the drone, knowing what you're looking at, someone that can make, real-time decisions in the field when it comes to inspections and documenting what needs treated or what needs cut, things like that when it comes to vegetation management. But I think like in the future, I don't think drones are going to ever fully, take away anybody's job, especially when it comes to manned aircraft. Like Deb had mentioned earlier, depending on the size of the area, and what your goal is, depends on the tool that you use. And like for, at least small to medium sized areas where it makes sense to use unmanned aircraft, I see a lot of utilities just integrating drones more fully into their ecosystem. I think they're going to be, it's going to be a lot more common to have digital twins of an entire system, and where they're feeding that drone directly into more like real grid time management systems, especially with the drone in the box solutions for visual inspections. But I'm hoping there also will be a more streamlined approach to BVLOS approvals across the U.S., especially when it comes to shielded operations on utility right-of-ways, to make it more efficient for us to be able to collect that data in a shorter amount of time. And then I'm thinking that there's going to be a lot more utilities. I know they've already started, but using that data that's collected by drones with AI to start helping their maintenance program and using it towards predictive maintenance to forecast equipment failures before they occur and just be more proactive versus reactive when it comes to maintaining assets or vegetation management.
That's a good point. Like trying to be predictive in maintenance, especially when you have as much data as you get from a drone activity. I think we can be predictive. We can have a scheduled replacement, and there's not a ton of components, to be honest, in the drones for folks listening. I mean, I'm sure they know, but a couple props, maybe a motor once every few years, but it's not super intense in that regard. Thank you very much for your time. I mean, it goes by so quick. I have a ton more questions and things that we would love to know. But the thing that, again, sticks in my head is I'm thinking about the biplane with the Snoopy goggles, and I'm flying in to spray some sprays, and I get real close and low, and then I pull up and I try to circle around, and I'm like, that seems so dangerous. And then I'm thinking about the guy with a helicopter and a razor blade below, and I'm like, that's so dangerous. And now what we can do is put somebody with a much more manageable tool away from the danger, way more accurate, and do those same type of activities. And I think that's where drones enhance safety. And the last thing I want to know is, are you guys looking for pilots? Are you looking for maintainers? What are your next projects, or are you kind of out there exploring bringing on folks in the pilot world?
We are actually currently right now. We have a few requisitions out, specifically more on where it's those niche markets, right? So the spraying, there's so much more that goes into play when it comes to getting certified. And so with, being nationwide, we need those certifications for each and every state that has different requirements. And so it's a little more, you can certainly internally grow, but if we can bring on more opportunities for new pilots to come on board that has certifications in those states, that'll help us be able to grow our services nationwide quicker.
There you go. So you heard it here first. If you're out there with your biplane and your aerial spraying aircraft, that's awesome. But maybe reach out to Davey and see if there's some opportunities for you to move into the new world and the future world of drone application, and that will, I promise you, be exciting. Thank you, ladies, for your time. It was great talking to you. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. You too. And thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks, Rachel and Deb. Very interesting to see the impacts drones have in enhancing safety for land management crews and our neighbors with precision application and control. I look forward to seeing more from Davey very soon. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Bye for now.